Hi, it's Eric from Real World Readiness. Let's talk about food storage. Food is one of our primary needs, along with shelter and water. Without food, we won't make it more than about a month or so, and you'll be ineffective long before that, and unhappy even before that. We take it for granted that you just run down to a restaurant or the grocery store and get something to eat when you need to. Sometimes you won't be able to. What happens if the power's out, stores are closed? What happens if something's happened to the infrastructure, whether it's a hurricane or an earthquake or something along those lines, or even a tornado, and you can't get your normal food supplies? Well, if you have food on hand, you don't have to worry about it. You got breathing room, you got time to figure out what you're going to do, and maybe just enough to ride it over if it's a smaller emergency. So let's talk about storing food. If you have a supply of food laid up, it can help you to avoid the rush. If something does happen, especially if you're in an urban area, there's a good chance that if something goes wrong, a lot of people aren't going to be ready for it. In fact, it's almost a certainty that a lot of people aren't going to be ready for it. So there's going to be a rush on the stores. There's going to be a little bit of chaos. It's going to be, at a minimum, a gigantic pain in the rear. And at worst, it could be a dangerous situation out there. But if you have food set aside already and you're prepared for that, you don't have to be part of that rush. You don't have to be part of that panic. And you have room to stop and breathe and get your feet under you. So the first question is, how much food do you need? The government recommends that you have 3 to 4 days worth of food on hand, and they have a website that's actually pretty good about food storage. And a lot of the information in this video is available on that website. And I'll go ahead and put a link to that down below in the description. It's ready.gov is the website, and they have a page on food storage. Like I said, the link will be down below. But I would say that is minimum of the amount of food you want to have on hand. I would have on hand as much food as you can. Ideally, be able to feed yourself for years, but like everything else that we talk about, it's unlikely you'll get to that point. It'd be nice for all of us to be able to homestead and sustainably grow all our own food. It's unrealistic to expect to have a lifetime's worth of food stored in a bunker, but any amount you can have, it gives you that much more of a cushion, that much more of a safe zone, and that much more longer of a incident you can handle without worrying about it. At a minimum, it gives you room to breathe and figure out what your next move is. So for me, I find it helpful to kind of break it down into basically three different categories of food. Your immediate food supplies, your long-term storage food supplies, and your end-of-the-world, last forever food supplies. Your immediate food supplies is the stuff you're already eating. It's the stuff that's in your refrigerator, stuff that's in your cabinets, your perishables, your stuff that needs refrigeration or a freezer to stay good. These are the things that you're used to eating, your normal diet, your regular go to the grocery store, what are we having for dinner next Thursday stuff. And that's what you should eat first, because number one, you're used to it, and number two, if it's perishable and your incident involves a loss of power, you either have to figure out how to power your refrigerator and freezer, or that food's going to go bad. So eat that first and use those calories. And in fact, if you think you're in an extended event and you're not going to be able to preserve that food, eat as much of it as you can. Use those calories, put them in, even if you're not going to eat it. Our bodies are designed to store calories to some extent. Yeah, I know we don't all want to gain weight and all that, but in an emergency, that's a different story. You want to put those calories to use. So don't let food go bad, but eat your perishable stuff first, and then move on to your second tier of supplies, which is your main emergency preparedness supplies. Now, I like to have principles and concept underlying what I do. That way, it's not a step-by-step, check things off the box, how to do it, that you can mess up. If you have an idea of why you're doing things and the benefits of it and the principles behind it, you can adapt your plan a lot more easily if you're following like a checklist. So for long-term food storage, there's some basic principles that I like to integrate into my food plan. First of all, try and store things that you ordinarily eat. Like for us, we eat chili, green beans. I have a pancake mix that I like, various. So if you can take foods that are either the foods you already eat or are similar to foods you already eat and use those in your long-term storage, it's going to be a lot nicer for you. Your body's going to be used to the food. You're not going to have to adapt to a change in your diet. You're going to be more comforted. You're going to feel more at home. It's going to be a lot less of a shock to your physical system. So try and store what you eat, even if you have to preserve it somehow, or something similar to what you eat, so you're not changing everything up all at once. Also, if you do that, you can rotate your stock. So put your newest supplies in the back, oldest supplies in the front, and run through them. For example, let's say green beans. My wife and I eat a lot of green beans. If I got green beans down in my storage, When I run out up in the cabinet, I'll go down and grab 3 or 4 cans out of my stack and put them in the cupboard for use. And then when I go to the store, I'll buy more to replace the ones I took out of my stockpile. And that way you don't have food down there just getting older and older and older. You can rotate it through, keep it fresh, keep it appetizing, keep it as nutritious as possible, and have the most effective stockpile of food that you can have. Try and avoid a lot of refined sugars. They're not doing anything for you except a little temporary burst of energy. So when you're stockpiling food for emergencies, make sure that's food that's is nutritious and it's going to be beneficial to you and make you stronger. Keeping in mind, of course, that also a lot of times in an emergency you're working harder too, so you need more productive calories. You need to feed your body because it's the machine that's going to keep you alive and help you recover from whatever disaster it is you're facing. And finally, think about preparation. The less steps in preparing, the more likely it's not going to be a problem. For example, most canned food is fully cooked already, and you can eat it cold if you like to, or even just heat it up. A lot of foods you can store, you just need to add water, pasta, beans, things like that. But you do have to have water to do that. So think about that as well. Make sure you've got a good water supply. I've got another video on storing water that's kind of along these same lines, goes hand in hand. I'll put a link to that right here, and you can check that out when you get done with this one. But yeah, make sure you got water to cook it. Make sure you thought ahead to a way to cook it, like a camp stove or a gas range or even an open fire. Whatever way that you can think of to integrate into your plan to cook the food that you have as well, so that it becomes edible and palatable and enjoyable to eat. The most obvious example of these kinds of foods is canned goods. Canned goods are incredibly long-lived, as long as the can isn't damaged. You'll see on that ready.gov site and other research elsewhere, canned goods have an expiration date on them, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. If the can's in good shape, it's not cracked, dented, or rusted through, the food inside will stay edible almost indefinitely. It'll stay edible for years and years and years. Now, as it ages, it will change in appearance, it'll change in texture, it'll change in taste, and it'll drop in nutritional value. So you want to rotate that out and try and keep it as fresh as you can. But you could still eat a can of beans or a can of whatever you've got, can of soup. If the can's not damaged, you can open that and eat it years down the road. So that's one of the huge advantages of canned goods. Again, like everything else that we store, you got to store it in good conditions. You want it to be cool in the dark and not in direct sunlight or anything like that. But keep that temperature as low as you can on it as well. Just room temperature is fine, but don't put it like a hot garage in August. Now, that said, not all canned food can just be stored on the shelf indefinitely. Some things, particularly canned hams is a big one. Some canned goods do have to be refrigerated even before they're opened, and it will say on the package. So if you're in doubt, look at the package and see if it says refrigerate before opening, then obviously you're going to need to not store that down the shelf in your basement. It won't last. It'll go bad. Again, also with canned foods, when you are opening to use them, if you have any suspicions about a can, don't use it. Canned food, when it goes bad, can be really bad, all the way up to botulism, which can be fatal. So if a can is damaged, don't chance it. If you open a can, it doesn't smell right, it doesn't look right, don't chance it. Just because it hisses doesn't mean that it's bad, though. This is from the U.S. Or the ready.gov site as well, the USDA site. Some things are going to be pressurized from the canning process. They're canned at a different altitude. Just the fact that a can hisses when you open it does not mean that it's bad. But if the can is bulged out, if it's damaged, if the food looks or smells bad, don't take a chance on it. It's not worth getting food poisoning, especially in a situation where you don't have necessarily ready access to immediate medical attention. Along with canned goods, there is a lot of dried goods you can store. I'm talking things like beans, pasta, rice, flour, cornmeal, things of that nature. They'll store a long time on a shelf unopened. However, in their original packaging, they will eventually get stale and or go bad. So some things will actually go rancid. Some things will become really stale and difficult to eat. Some things can get mold in them. So you do want to rotate out your dry goods more often than your canned goods. Like, you don't want to leave a pack of pasta just in the box you got it from the store on the shelf for 10 years and then come back and try and eat it. Or flour is another one. Beans and rice last almost indefinitely unless insects get into them. But dried goods are also really long shelf life. Again, storage conditions are important. Cool, dry, dark. Those are the things you're really looking for anytime you're storing anything you intend to eat or drink. Now, there are ways to extend the life of canned goods. Vacuum sealing is really popular for storing, especially if you buy these things in bulk, they're often really inexpensive in bulk. And you put them in smaller packages, vacuum seal them, a lot of times with a moisture absorber packet inside of them, and they will last years longer than they would have before. Vacuum sealers are relatively inexpensive. They're easy to operate. An even better way to store foods is to freeze dry them. And this doesn't have to be just for dry goods. You can use this for fresh food as well. You can freeze dry vegetables, meat, pretty much anything. You can freeze dry it. And once it's freeze dried, it'll last 25 years. But freeze dryers are expensive, so a lot of people don't have availability to that option. I've never done it myself, but freeze drying is an excellent way to preserve foods for long term. One other thing about dried goods is a lot of times dried goods are an ingredient or part of a recipe, and you need to make sure that you have availability to things to complete, like flour by itself. You can mix it with water and eat it, but it's not really much of a food. So you want to try and have, the other things you need, oil and salt and yeast and all these other things as well. And also a lot of dried goods require a lot of water to cook, like beans and rice in particular require a lot of water to really cook, especially dried beans. You got to soak them and boil them. It takes a lot of water. So again, make sure you've got your water storage plan working hand in hand with your food storage plan. Then the third tier in my mind is your long-term storage. I mean, like emergency food. This is not food that you normally would eat. This is the food that you have specifically for emergency use. What I'm talking about here is a lot of your commercially freeze-dried stuff, your emergency rations, your backpacking food, the packets that you can buy at the sporting goods store and the camping section of Walmart, the freeze-dried packaged food. These foods will last a long time. 25 years is advertised for a lot of them. They'll sit there in their bucket or their pouch in a good stored area. Again, dry, dark, cool. But if you store them properly, 25 years later, you can pop those things open and they'll be just as good as they were the day that they were freeze-dried and packed. That said, they're not necessarily very good. Some of them are all right. Some brands are better than others. But generally, they're not fantastic food, but they are calories, they are nutrition, they will keep you alive, and they're light and easy to store. You can put them in the back of a closet and forget about it, and they're there. And you can store a lot of food because they're dried and small. You can store a lot of food in a small space. A lot of these buckets will have 20 meals, 30 meals in them. They also come in wildly varying qualities. Some of them are not bad nutritionally. Some of them have a pretty good nutritional balance. Some of them are just straight carbs and salt, and they'll keep you alive, but they're not really good for you. Like the ones I have 3 buckets of the ReadyWise from Costco. They're fine. They're food. It's better than no food. They're not great as far as a balanced meal, but there are other brands that are, and I'll get into those in a different video. I'll start trying to test some of these out and see which ones I'm going to wind up going with myself for the long term. But again, this isn't food that you intend to eat every day. This is food for everything's gone really wrong and you just need some food to stay alive, and that's what this food is for. Again, these foods usually require water to cook. They're usually all they take is some water to mix in and boil it up and reconstitute it back into food. An exception to that fits in this category is the meals ready to eat, or MREs, military issued rations. Again, these things will last forever. When I was first in the service, I was in a unit that stood up, was started from scratch, and we were issued in 2000. In 2001, we were issued MREs that were made in the 80s, and they were MREs. They were edible. You could eat them. They were probably not any worse than they were when they were made. But that said, MREs are just not usually very tasty. They're packed with calories. They're nutrient dense. They're a great food source. They're relatively compact. They usually come with their own heater that you can heat them up with. You can eat them cold right out of the pouch. If you have some, great. More power to you. But they also are, their advantage is they don't require any water to cook either. So that's an advantage. I personally will eat MREs if I'm starving, but that's it. All right, this sounds pretty intimidating if you're just starting out. There's a lot of food. A lot of us are tight on the grocery bills to begin with, and the idea of packing up a bunch of food that we may or may not ever need to get to and storing it away can be very intimidating. But the thing to remember is, like everything, well, not everything, but like a lot of the other things we talk about, it's not necessarily something you have to do all at once. I mean, you never know when something's going to happen, like a hurricane or an earthquake or whatever, but there's a pretty good bet it's probably not going to be today or tomorrow. It might be, but it's probably not. Most days are normal days. Almost every day of your life is a normal day, except for when it finally isn't. But you have time to prepare for that, and some preparation is better than none. I mean, if you have a day's worth of extra food in the house, that's better than none. You have a week's worth, that's better than a day. If you have a month's worth, that's better than a week, and so on and so forth. One way you can start, especially with the second tier, your canned goods and your dry goods, is to buy those things incrementally. When you're shopping for groceries, I've said this before in other videos, if you need 2 cans of soup, buy 3. It's an extra, $1.50, $2. You put that other third one away. And you just keep on doing that. And before you know it, after very much time at all, you'll find that you have food put away. You can do the same thing with dry goods. You can do this when things go on sale. A lot of times grocery stores will have what they call a case sale, where they got cases of soup on sale for dirt cheap, or cases of whatever on sale for dirt cheap, or you can go to the Costco and buy a flat. But you can incrementally increase, especially easily to incrementally increase your canned food, your dry goods, and things like that. And again, if you're buying the stuff that you eat, you will eventually eat it if you rotate it through, like we talked about. So you're always eating your oldest stock and putting newer stock in to replace it. And once you've reached your amount that you're targeted for how much you want to have saved, at that point it just becomes regular grocery shopping and just replacing what you eat. As far as the long-term food, the same thing. Look for sales. I've noticed that an awful lot of these emergency food supply places online will have sales periodically, especially around holidays where you can get really good deals on them. Costco does sell some. They sometimes sell backpacking meals. They sometimes sell the buckets of emergency food. And the packets of the individual backpacking meals are often on sale at outlet stores or sporting goods stores for like $5 or $6 a piece, and you can pick up the same thing. Pick up 1 or 2 at a time. It's not a big lift, and eventually you got a week's worth of food, month's worth of food set aside that's ready to go. So you can just do it a little bit at a time, and if you think it through and pick the things that you want to eat, then it's not just sitting there existing, waiting for something that may happen. You can actually integrate it into your day-to-day. One thing people don't think about these kind of things too is I've heard numerous stories from people that, let's say the breadwinner in the family loses their job or gets injured and can't work and doesn't have anything to fall back on. I've heard of people that have gotten through periods of unemployment based on their food stocks. It doesn't have to be a natural disaster or the end of the world or any of the big scary scenarios that we think of. It could be something as simple as losing your job and not wanting to spend money at the grocery store for a couple of months while you tighten the belt looking for the next one. And people get through things like that all the time on their food stockpiles. So there are a lot of reasons to do this, and it's pretty easy to do. You can also preserve your own food, and actually this is a great way to go. I'm trying to get more and more into canning and drying my own stuff as well, partly because you know what the food is. It's food that you either purchased or grew or hunted yourself. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So if you have a garden, if you have the ability to go hunt, if you have access to fresh meat, or even if you just get a good deal on some stuff at the grocery store, if you can it yourself, you can preserve it. Home canned goods, it's the same story as commercially canned goods. If you do it right and you do it safely, your canned goods will last for years, and you can rotate the same stock through. Eat last year's food now while you can this year's food. And you can actually have a better quality of food stores because you know where it came from, especially if you grow it yourself. You can also dry food. I make jerky routinely. In fact, I have a little short about making jerky. I'll try and link that right here. But you can dry fruit. You can dry berries. We've got out here in my yard. We've got our service berries are just coming into flower. They're going to be ready to pick soon. I'm going to plan on drying a whole mess of those and use them in my oatmeal and pancakes throughout the winter. You can dry it with commercially available dehydrators, electric ones. You can dry things in the sun. You can build a smokehouse. That's one of the things I'd like to do, and if I do, I'll make a video to show you guys. But I'd like to make a cold smokehouse, old style smokehouse with the fire pit and the tube and the shed you hang your bacon in. I'd like to try that. And all these things, smoking and drying, were all originally ways to preserve food and make it last through the winter. So that's exactly what they're for, and they're not hard to do. It's actually a lot easier than you think it is, I guarantee. Another food storage option that doesn't rely on electricity is a root cellar. Not all of us have the ability to have a root cellar, but if you live in a place where you can, it's a pretty big project to dig out a root cellar. But once you do, what you've done is you've made an underground area where the earth regulates the temperature. It's always cooler down there, and your vegetables can be stored down there. There's a whole art and science to it, but you can store vegetables and meat, smoked meats, preserved meats down in your root cellar, and they'll last a long time. They'll last all through the winter without freezing. They'll last a lot of times through the summer, depending on where you are and how well your root cellar is constructed. That's how they used to do it in the old days before they had refrigerators. All right, that's pretty much an introductory primer to food storage and preservation. There's a lot more details. Hopefully I'll have some more detailed videos on a few of these topics in the future. But another thing, and let's wrap up with a few random thoughts here. One thing for sure is try and store some of your food in a fashion such that it can be easily accessed and carried. Thinking more of your dried food, thinking more of your freeze-dried food, your emergency type food here. And the reason is if you have to evacuate your home. It could be for a wildfire evacuation. You could have a train car spill chemicals down the road. It could be earthquake or hurricane or flood related. But if for some reason you have to go in a hurry, it'd be nice if you could grab a decent amount of food, several days or a week's supply of food in just one already packaged, ready to go box or bag you can just grab and throw in your car and take with you if you have to go. So that's something to think about, is having I don't know what you call it, a ready locker, ready to go with some food, ready to head out the door with you if you got a jet in a hurry. Have a way to cook without power. It can be as simple as a Coleman stove. Or you could have a brick fire oven in the backyard that you could use for barbecues when things aren't going bad. Or know how to operate your gas stove if the power goes out. Can you turn it on and light it with a match? Mine you can. You can't use the oven because the oven requires the computer. But the top stove, you can just turn it on, light the burner with a match, and away you go just like normal. Fires, campfires are an age-old way. Wood stoves can be used to cook. Just make sure that you've thought this through and you don't have a bunch of food that you can't prepare because you haven't thought how to prepare it. Speaking of preparing, one thing a lot of people forget is have several can openers, and not electric ones, manual, old-style, old-fashioned can openers, because all these canned foods, if you don't have a can opener, it's going to just be aggravating trying to get into those cans every time you need to eat something. And water, you know, I mean, make sure you've got lots of water. That's all I'm going to say about that. I keep saying that over and over again, but water is critical. Have water stored and a way to purify water so you can replenish it when you use it up. I guess my last thought would be learn to hunt, learn to fish, learn to forage. All three of those things are all that our ancestors had that were pioneering the West, and the natives that were here before us, they lived in this land without grocery stores, without farms, without any of the things that we count as food supplies now. They lived off the land. It is possible almost wherever you are in this country to live off the land. You just need to know how to do it. So learn to hunt, learn to fish, and learn that edible plants are. As an example, dandelions grow in almost every part of this country. The entire dandelion plant is edible, from the flowers to the leaves to the root. I don't think you need the stems, but everything else is edible, and they're everywhere. And there are loads of plants like that. I'm working on my knowledge in my local area. Everywhere's got different plants. Somebody knows what they are. Figure out who it is and learn from them, because there's food all around you for free that you can find and survive off of. People did for centuries. I think that's all I've got for you now on that. If you got any questions or comments, put them down below. I'd love to read them. I'd like to have a discussion about it. If you think of something I missed, or you think I'm wrong about something, let me know that too. It won't hurt my feelings. And I will be happy to read those, and we'll have a little conversation. And I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe, stay ready.